scare you, no evil thing will. To see her is to take a sudden chill. Cruella, Cruella.
Well, I'm still on my back porch because I don't want to go too far away from the air conditioning today. Woo, it's going to be a hot one. It's funny reading about the next chapter entitled Christmas Eve. It was chapter 14. Reading that on a very hot day. Kind of weird. Okay, Christmas Eve. Meanwhile, the Dalmatian army was swinging along the road in fine style. The night was very still. The pups were rested and hopeful, and the fact that a tired little dog could take a rest with the cadpig in her cart made tired little dogs feel less tired. Indeed, Mrs. at first had to insist that the smaller pups take turns to rest, but progress was not really fast. There were so many pauses while pups who pulled the cart were changed, and pauses while pups got in and out of the cart. At every half mile, the whole army had a rest. Still, all went wonderfully well until they were within half a mile of the village where they were to spend the day. Gardeners, they're very loud in this development. Okay, I think it's safe to read now. There was a hint of dawn in the sky now, but Pongo felt sure that they could reach the village before it was dangerously light. He quickened his pace slightly and told the pups to think of breakfast ahead of them at the bakery. It was soon after this the cadpig called out, "Look, little painted houses on wheels." Pongo saw them at the same moment, but he knew that they were not houses, they were caravans. He had seen them once when out with Mr. Dearly, and had heard Mr. Dearly say that gypsies lived in caravans, and gypsies sometimes stole valuable dogs. "Halt," said Pongo instantly. Could they get past the caravans without being seen? He wasn't going to risk it. Between them and the nearest caravan was an open gate. He would lead the puppies through it and take them through the fields until they were well past the caravans. Swiftly he gave his instructions, which were handed on from pup to pup. "We are to keep dead quiet and follow Pongo through the gate." And thus did the owner of one of the keenest brains in dogdom make one of his few mistakes. For the caravan nearest to them, an old gypsy woman was awake looking out of the little back window. She saw the approaching Dalmatians and at once woke her husband. He was beside her at the window just as Pongo led the way to the field. The old gypsy woman never read newspapers, so she knew nothing of the stolen puppies, but she knew that they were many valuable dogs, and she knew something else, which Pongo did not know. There was a connection between Dalmatians and gypsies. Many people believe that it was the gypsies who first brought Dalmatians to England long, long ago. And nothing like as long ago as that, there were gypsies who traveled around England with Dalmatians trained to do tricks. And these performing dogs earned money for the gypsies. The old woman could remember such dogs, and she thought how splendid it would be if these Dalmatians could be trained as money earners. "Quick, close the gate," she said to her husband. She spoke in the strange gypsy language, which is called Romany. "The only other way out of that field is through a break in the hedge. I will rouse the camp and we will stop the dogs there and catch them." In less than 2 minutes, the whole gypsy encampment was awake. Children cried, dogs barked, horses neighed. It was still so dark that it took Pongo 5 minutes to find the break in the hedge, and when he found it, he was also found the way barred. All the gypsies were there with sticks and ropes. "Back to the gate as fast as you can," he cried to the pups, but when they reached the gate, it was closed. They were trapped. Pongo barked loudly, hoping that some gypsy dog might help them. Many gypsy dogs barked in answer, but they had all been shut up in the caravans in case they could fight with the Dalmatians. In any case, they barked only in Romany, so they could not understand a word Pongo said. But someone else did. Suddenly, Pongo heard the high neigh of a horse close at hand, and, oh, most wonderful, the horse could neigh normally as well as in Romany. It understood Pongo, and he understood it. Horses are nearly always friendly to Dalmatians, perhaps because of those days when Dalmatians were trained to follow carriages. The horse was not old enough to remember such days, but took an instant liking to Pongo, Missus, and all the pups. If the pleasant creatures wished to come out of the field, nothing could be easier. He strolled up and opened the gate with his long, strong teeth and swung it back. Out poured the puppies. "Lead them past the caravans as fast as you can," Pongo shouted to Missus, and waited to see that the last pup was out of the field. "With a very large family, what a very large family you and your wife had," said the horse. "My wife and I have had more than one. Oh, my wife and I have never had more than one. What good luck to you." He waved aside Pongo's thanks, and then, being very tidy horse, carefully closed the gate again. So never did the gypsies, all waiting at the break in the hedge, know how the prisoners got away. Helter-skelter along the road went Missus, the puppies, and finally Pongo. The pups who drew the cad-pig's cart stuck faithfully to their task. The shut-in Romany dogs heard them and shook the caravans in their efforts to get out. Volleys of furious barking came from the little windows. "The caravans bark, but the dogs move on," remarked Pongo when he felt that they were out of danger. A few minutes later, they reached the village where they were to sleep. The sheepdog's friend, a handsome collie, was waiting there to welcome them. "No talk until you're safely hidden," he said. "It's almost light." They followed him across the village to 3 old gabled houses. The baker's was in the middle between the butcher's and the chimney sweep's. The baker and the butcher and the sweep were all widowers, and as it was Sunday, had already gone to spend Christmas with their married daughters, which was just as well. The baker's shop would not have been nearly big enough to house all the pups, and luckily there was a large bakehouse at the back, and soon every pup was safely enjoying a splendid sausage roll. Pongo and Missus chatted with the collie while they ate. He shook his head worriedly when he heard about the gypsies. "A narrow escape," he said. "The trouble is that Dalmatians are such noticeable dogs. 99 of you together are spectacular, though I mean it as a compliment. You'd be much safer if you were black." "Like that nice little pup over there," said Missus. "What pup?" said the collie, looked across the bakehouse, and then said sharply, "That pup doesn't belong in this village. Who are you, my lad? Where have you come from?" The black pup did not answer. Instead, he came running to Missus and butted her in the stomach. "Here, hold on, young man," said Missus. Then she gasped. "Goodness, it is. It isn't? It is. Roly-poly." The fat puppy, who was always getting into mischief, had found his way into a shed in the back of the sweep's house and had a fight with a bag of soot. "Mercy, you'll need some washing," said his mother. Then it was that one of the keenest brains in dogdom had one of its brainiest waves. "Roly-poly," said Pongo. "Was there a lot of soot at the sweeps?" "Bags and bags," said Roly-poly. "Then we are all going to be black dogs," said Pongo. "Your husband is a genius," said the collie to Missus as he showed them all to the sweep shed. There was any amount of soot waiting to have done with it whichever sweeps do with soot. 10 dogs forward at a time," commanded Pongo. "Pups roll. Pups rub noses." In a very short time there were 97 pitch-black pups. "And now, my love," said Pongo to Missus, "let us take a roll in the soot." Frankly, Missus did not fancy it. She hated soiling her gleaming white hair and losing its smart contrast with her beautiful black spots. But when Pongo had helped her with the final touches, he said, "Why, Missus, as a black dog you're slimmer than ever. You're positively svelte." And then she felt much better. Then Pongo said, "How does soot suit me?" "Soot suits you beautifully," said Missus, and all the pups roared with laughter at her mistake. Then they all went back to the bakehouse and settled down to sleep. The collie said that he would call them soon as it was dark. They would have only 5 minutes to go to another bakery, but he felt that they should get the journey over as early as he had heard there might be snow. "But there may be cars on the road until late, as it is Christmas Eve and Sunday," he told them, "so you must go by the fields. I shall escort you. Rest well now." Poor Missus, when she awoke in the late afternoon and looked around her, she dissolved into sooty tears. "I can't tell one pup from the other now that they're black," she said. But she soon found she could, though she could never have explained how she managed it. Another meal had been organized, but it was not all that could have been wished, because the butcher had meanly locked up his shop. "This clears the bakery out," says the collie, carrying the last stale loaf. But there will be a good supper waiting for you, and the journey oughtn't take more than 3 or 4 hours. He then went off to see if there was any news coming by way of the twilight barking. After half an hour or so, Pongo began to feel anxious. It was quite dark now, and they ought to be off. What was delaying the collie? Listen, said Mrs. suddenly. Very, very faintly they could hear the collie barking. He was calling Pongo's name again and again. Pongo and Mrs. ran out of the bakehouse to the little yard in the back. Now they could hear the collie more clearly, but he was obviously some way off. Pongo barked in answer to him, and swiftly the collie told him what had happened. He was locked in a house across the green, with no hope of getting out. The postmistress had promised to look after him while the baker was away for Christmas. She had decided it was too cold of a night for a dog to be out, and hauled him in, and gone out for the evening. He had tried every door, every window, but could undo none of them. It was impossible for him to escort the Dalmatians as he promised. But you can't miss your way, Pongo, he barked. Out over the field at the back of the bakehouse, straight on for 5 miles. Pongo told him not to worry, but the poor collie was most unhappy. Here I am, locked in with a warm fire and a good supper, and powerless to help you. Both Pongo and Mrs. told him to eat the supper and enjoy the fire, and thanked him for all he had done. And now, off we go, said Pongo, bringing the pups out of the bakehouse, and no straggling, because it would be very easy to lose a black pup on a dark night. But it was not really very dark, for already the moon was rising and the stars were out. This was one specially large, bright star. The collie said straight ahead, and the stars straight ahead, said Pongo, so we'll steer by it. He was thankful that they were going by way of the fields and not by way of the road, for he remembered that Corella had told the Baden brothers that she would come down tomorrow night and count the bodies. Now it was tomorrow night, and the great zebra-striped car would be somewhere on the road from London to Suffolk. How terrible it would be to meet. He imagined the glare from the headlights, imagined Corella driving straight at the army of panic-stricken puppies. Yet he would certainly avoid the roads. But even so, it was frightening to know that Corella might be quite near. He put the thought out of his mind as he and Mrs. got the pups in marching order. Their way lay through grassy meadows over which the cad pig's cart trundled smoothly. At every hedge and ditch, Pongo paused and counted the pups to see that none had strayed. And Mrs. changed the pups who drew the cart and the pups who rested in it. Already, even the smallest puppies were getting hardier. Even the cad pig got out of the cart and walked 3 fields before getting in again. Soon we shall be able to do 10 miles a day, said Pongo. They had traveled about 3 miles when the first disaster of the night happened. There was a sudden bump and a wild squeal from the cad pig. A wheel had come off the little blue cart. Pongo saw at once that the cart could be mended. A wooden peg which fixed the hub to the wheel and the axle had come out. But could he ever, using his teeth, put this peg back in? He tried and failed. Could the cad pig manage without the cart? He whispered to Mrs. Mrs. shook her head. Walking 3 fields had been enough for her smallest daughter, and the other daughters could not walk more than a mile without a rest. Then mend the cart I must, said Pongo, and you must help me by holding the wheel in position. They tried and tried without success. Then, while they were resting a moment, Mrs. noticed that many of the pups were shivering. They'd better keep warm by running races, said Pongo. But that would tire them, said Mrs. Couldn't they all just go over to that barn over there? They could see a big tiled roof 2 short fields away, not very clearly, but because the moon was behind the clouds, but this lack of light which made it so hard to mend the cart. That's a good idea, said Pongo, and when the cart's mended, we can bring it along and call for them all. Mrs. and the cad pig had better stay in the cart and help and keep warm in the hay. But the cad pig wanted to go with the others and see the barn. She felt sure she could walk 2 short fields, so Mrs. let her go. 2 strong pups were right sized to draw the cart stayed behind. They said they didn't mind the cold. So 95 pups, led by Lieutenant Lucky, set off briskly for the barn. But when they got there, it did not look at all like a barn from the sheepdog's farm. It was built of gray stone and had long windows, some with colored glass in them, and one at the end was a tower. Why, there's a Folly, said the cad pig, remembering the tower of the Folly at Hell Hall. Lucky was looking at the door when he found one. It was firmly shut. He told the pups to wait for him while he went around the building looking for some other way in. The cad pig did not wait. Come on, she said to her devoted brother Patch. I want to look at the Folly. And when they got to the tower, they saw a narrow door that wasn't quite closed. It was too heavy for them to push, but they could just squeeze through. Inside this tower was nothing like the one at Hell Hall. It opened into a gray stone building. "No hay in this barn," said the Cadpig. She had counted on hay for warmth, but she soon found she was warm enough without it, for there was a big stove alight, and it had a long iron pipe for a chimney which went right up through the raftered ceiling. The moon was out again now, and the light was streaming through the tall windows, and so that the clear glass made silver patterns on the stone floor, and the colored glass made blue, gold, and rose patterns. The Cadpig patted one of the colored patterns with a delicate paw. "I love this barn," she said. Patch said, "I don't think it is a barn," but he liked it as much as the Cadpig did. They wandered around, and suddenly they made a discovery. Whatever this mysterious place was, it was intended for puppies, for in front of every seat there were many seats. And there were many seats. Was a puppy-sized dog bed, padded and most comfortable. "Why, it's just meant for us to sleep in," said the Cadpig. I'll tell the other pups," said Patch, starting for the door. A glad cry from the Cadpig called him back. "Look! Look! Television!" But it was not like the television at Hell Hall. It was much larger, and the figures on the screen did not move or speak. Indeed, it was not a screen. The figures were really there, on a low platform, humans and animals, most lifelike, though smaller than in real life. They were in a stable, above which was one bright star. "Look at the humans kneeling," said Patch. "And there's a kind of a cow," said the Cadpig, remembering the cows at the farm who had given them all the pups' milk. "And a kind of horse," said Patch, remembering the helpful horse that had let them out the field. "No dogs," said the Cadpig. "What a pity. But I like it much better than ordinary television, only I don't know why." Then they heard Lucky and the others, who found their way in. Soon every pup was lying curled up on a comfortable dog bed and fast asleep, except the Cadpig. She had dragged along one of the dog beds by its most convenient little carpet ear, and was sitting on it, wide awake, gazing and gazing at the new and far more beautiful television. Once the moon came out from behind the clouds, Pongo had managed to mend the wheel. Oh, the feeling of satisfaction when the peg slipped into place. Mrs. Two felt proud. Had she not held the wheel? She, a dog who has never understood machinery. Quickly the two waiting pups seized their crossbar in their mouth. Then off they went to the barn. As they drew nearer, Pongo saw that this was no barn. "Surely they could not have gone in there," he said to Mrs. "Why not? If they were cold," said Mrs., "and they are far too young to know that they would not be welcome." Pongo and Mrs. knew that humans did not like dogs going into buildings which had tall towers and tall narrow windows. They had no idea why, and had been a little hurt when told to wait outside, but Mrs. Dearly had said once, "We would love you to come in if it was allowed, and I would go in far oftener if you could." So it was obviously one of those mysterious things, such as no one, not even humans, are ever being allowed to walk into certain paths or parts of the grass in Regent's Park. "We must get them out quickly," said Pongo, "and go on with our journey." They soon found the door in the tower, which the biggest pups had pushed wide open. Because Mrs. had always been left outside, she disliked the curious building with towers and high windows, but the minute she got inside, she changed her mind. This was a wonderful place, so peaceful and somehow so welcoming. "But where are the pups?" she said, peering all around. She saw lots of black patches on the moonlit floor, but had quite forgotten that all the pups were now black. Then she remembered, and as she drew nearer to one of the sleeping pups, tears sprang into her eyes. Look at all the puppy beds," she cried. "What good people must live here. It can't be the kind of place that I thought it was," said Pongo. He was about to wake the puppies when Mrs. stopped him. "Let me sit by the stove a little while," she said. "Not too long, my dear." He need not have worried. Mrs. sat still for only a few minutes. Then she got up, shook herself off, and said brightly, "Let us start now. Things are going to be all right." An hour or so later, just before the evening service, the verger said to the vicar, "I think there must be something wrong with the stove, sir." On every hassock he found a small circular patch of soot. Okay, obviously they were in a church on Christmas Eve, and Cad Pig was looking at a nativity scene. So there you go, and go on tomorrow.